All right, I think we will get started now. So, hello and welcome everyone. This is the second session of the Careers Beyond Academia, hosted by Stem Cell Network and Medicine by Design. My name is Sonam Dubey, and I am the Scientific Manager with Medicine by Design. Our goal here is to expose as many trainees as possible to different job roles that are available after the degree in life sciences, and to start to understand the qualifications and experience necessary to secure such roles. Both Stem Cell Network and Medicine by Design have teamed up to host this series, and we look to highlight a wide variety of careers available after the degree in life sciences. You can actually visit the Stem Cell Network's YouTube channel to look at the past Beyond Academia recordings. And in addition to this series, we have several other trainee events and opportunities that you can participate in, ranging from webinars and symposiums. So please be sure to check it out. You can also sign up for the newsletters and be notified of the upcoming opportunities. Just for you to note how the session will be run today, so it is going to be recorded, just the speaker series piece. The Q&A will not be recorded. Each speaker will have 10 to 12 minutes to speak, and then we will follow that up with a Q&A or panel discussion, which is the opportunity for you to ask questions, and you can put that in the Q&A box, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. You can also choose to ask the question live by raising your hand, and we will unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. I'd like to welcome Dr. Allison Bethune. Allison is a program manager in strategy and sustainability at the Harquail Center for Neuromodulation at Sunnybrook Research Institute. With over 15 years of experience in both research and clinical neurosciences, she has led operations for first-in-human trials of blood-brain barrier opening using focused ultrasound, and worked as an intraoperative electrophysiologist supporting neurosurgical procedures. She is currently working as a strategy and sustainability manager for the Harquail Center, as mentioned, at Sunnybrook. And Allison completed her master's degree at the University of Toronto in the Institute of Medical Sciences. So with that, I will transfer the stage over to you, Allison.
Thank you very much, Sonam, and thank you to Medicine by Design and the Stem Cell Network for offering this. I think I would have liked it as a grad student myself at this time. So I'll just share my slides. Okay, so yeah, as Sonam mentioned, I am working at Sunnybrook Research Institute, and I've been here quite a long time in various roles. Currently, I'm with the Harquail Center for Neuromodulation, working as a program manager, really with finance, strategic sustainability for a program of research that's investigating neurotechnologies specific to neuromodulation. So I'll explain a little bit about what that involves. Prior to being at Sunnybrook, I did an undergraduate at the University of Waterloo in kinesiology. I was fortunate to have a lot of co-op experiences in clinical settings, as well as research over that degree. And then I did a Master's of Science at IMS, which was a clinical master's through Sick Kids and U of T. So to give you a timeline kind of picture, 2002, I finished at Waterloo. I did have a minor in gerontology and some experience in electrophysiology that enabled me to have a role at Sunnybrook as an intraoperative neurophysiologist, monitoring spinal cord function in the OR. And I found it fascinating working with surgeons, nurses, a dynamic team. I'd always had a research interest, so 6 or 7 years later, I started a master's at U of T with Dr. Banwell, who's a pediatric neurologist. I kept it to a master's there because one thing I felt after having some time in the hospital that in my graduate studies was a very narrow view of things, and I appreciated or had interest in how the research that was going on is so important, how it can integrate into the hospital in a kind of a larger system. So I did come back to Sunnybrook in a different role and managed research activities again within neurosurgery, looking at stroke and endovascular procedures. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I moved to the current program I'm in, and it's been quite exciting. I'm overseeing trials that are first in human for focused ultrasound, opening the blood-brain barrier for delivery of therapeutics. So drugs that can't normally access the brain. There's talented physicists here and incredible patients that are willing to enroll in these early stage trials. So I've been doing that for 4 to 5 years. I'm going to say a typical background for someone managing trials like that. There's sort of a multidisciplinary trial, but we have people on our team who range from having a bachelor's degree, but did a certificate in clinical trial management. Others have a PhD in neuroscience or psychology. All of our work is in brain sciences. The potential salary range will vary. I'm talking about an academic teaching hospital. If you ended up doing clinical trial management in industry, your salary potentially is going to be much higher. And it will vary with your own training and experience as well. To give one sentence to what I do currently is support sustainable translation of neuromodulation clinical research techniques into hospital care. So I'm currently trying to help what has been successful be integrated into the system. The skills I rely on, I would say project management, that's just been developed over time. There's data management and analytics that has come from graduate school. And there's a certain amount of presentation and proposal writing, whether it's to hospital side or to donors or to granting agencies. There's also a fair bit of strategic planning when you're trying to integrate into a sort of large operation like Sunnybrook. Other careers I've considered along the way are variable. I started grad school thinking I wanted to do a PhD in neurophysiology. That evolved. Some other things I've looked at along the way, there's groups called decision support analysis. So they look at key decisions in the hospital that need to happen and how are we going to facilitate, or do we can we manage a new program in psychiatry or functional neurosurgery that doesn't currently exist here. So there's jobs you don't know about in a large, particularly academic center like Sunnybrook or many Toronto hospitals. Consulting is something that I think many people think about coming out of graduate school. I've not done it, but I think you get interesting and unique challenges if you're sort of someone that likes to solve problems. Yeah, so I won't get into too much. If I broke broadly my time at the Harquail Center into what you would do if you're managing clinical trials, and then what would you do if you're in a program management kind of role where I am now. 2 different streams in a way. But to oversee and kind of put together the clinical trial piece, I was particularly looking at, I'm looking at the time, thanks Sonam, recruiting patients with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So being comfortable consenting patients who have a very serious neurodegenerative disease, they don't have a cure. There's a soft skill component there that's big, but you also have to be a little bit efficient in getting them through 15 screening visits that range from MRIs to PET scans to lumbar punctures, and coordinating with a treatment day. So there's a lot of moving parts. There's data management and communication with Health Canada or the regulatory sponsor in some cases. moving to sort of the overall program, which is a little more what I'm involved in now, I have a opportunity to think about how can we make this sustainable, because research is nonprofit, there's not a revenue stream, so we have to support and encourage growth for the most potential kind of techniques, and how do we translate that? So I'm learning about working with OTAC, Ontario Health Technologies Assessment Committee. And so with the hospital finance, it's kind of an interesting and new thing to think about. Why this is important, I feel broadly doing early stage trials provides hope to patients with limited options, and it's important to progress science. So looking at new ways to deliver drugs that can't normally get into the brain is exciting. It has applications in cancer, neurodegenerative disease, and others. And the strategic design of a sustainable program is important, I think, just for longevity. So the work that we are putting in is lasting. It's not just what's hot now and disappears. I enjoy this because it is multidisciplinary. It leverages a number of experiences I've had, clinical background, opportunity to collaborate with teams, process involvement in the hospital, as well as being based on good science. And I would say there are challenges like anything. There are unpredictable timelines in clinical trials. There are peaks and valleys for enrollment, regulatory approvals, and there are pressures with philanthropic support. You have to always make sure that this is impactful, and the donors will be encouraged to allow you to keep going. Yeah, I think the future career opportunities, there are many. You could move into industry. It's a bigger pot in industry, whether it's drugs or medical devices. The opportunity to be integrated into the hospital if you have some clinical interest that way. And as I mentioned, strategy or consulting would be of interest. So I think I'm running out of time, but if people want, I can go into what options for certificates or subspecialties they could. I would say SOCRA or CCRA are certificates to train someone in clinical research. If you wanted health professions, a little more focused, sometimes a one-year course or something in the Michener Institute. There are things there that I didn't realize were, but the interoperative neurophysiology that I used to do is now a Michener certification program. It didn't exist at the time. Respiratory therapists or anesthesia assistants. These are sort of short-term courses that could set you up well for a career that's pretty interesting outside of academia. And these are things I've recently seen and done some of. There's professional development courses for U of T, Bloomberg School of Nursing, even if you're not a nurse, has some. Yeah, the other thing I would mention is if you're interested in process, Sigma 6 or lean thinking principles, that's sort of a process improvement kind of certificate that's widely recognized beyond healthcare. But you can find those online, and they're pretty excellent courses. One thing I did do when I was at U of T, through the Graduate Management Consulting Association, they called it a mini MBA. It gave you a bit of insight into finance. So if that's something that's not in your skill set now and you want to learn more about, you might find it worthwhile. It's very affordable and 6-week kind of commitment. So I think that's it. I really just wanted to say, if you had some short-term options, just think about what they are and keep your long-term options sort of flexible, but pursue something that is passionate for you, because when there'll be a time when it really feels like work, and it's easier to keep going when it feels like work, something you really care about. So thank you. That's all. These are the people that I've been lucky to work with, and I'll pass it over.
Thank you, Allison. That was a great talk. And all of the resources you provided there were very helpful, and we can certainly look to all of this recording will be online. So if you didn't catch the different resources that Allison talked about, you can look at that in the recording on YouTube. All right, so as mentioned earlier, we will have the questions addressed at the end. So we'll move on to our next speaker. And I'd like to welcome Josee Champagne. Josee is the co-founder and director of weCANtrial Consulting Group, a partner of the weCANtranslate network, as well as associate director of clinical development at Northern Therapeutics and senior research associate at Ottawa Research Institute. Josee has over 20 years of experience in supporting investigator and industry-led clinical research and has assisted in translating 7 cell-based research projects to the clinic. Welcome, Josee. I'll have you take over the stage, and I will just share your slides in one moment.
Perfect. Thank you, Sonam. I will wait for my slides to come up, but as Sonam is getting that ready, so yes, I wear multiple hats. And I think the best way to describe me is the jack of all trades, master of none. And through my presentation today, what I hope to do is kind of give you a little bit of some of those soft skills and a personal approach as to how I got to where I am today and how I manage all these multiple hats and how what I do in order to make it so that it's sustainable over a long period of time. Next slide, please. So as Sonam mentioned, these are my current positions. I am the Associate Director of Clinical Development that is over on the industry side. At the Ottawa Hospital OHRI, I am the Program Manager for UC-CISS and CIRCA 19. UC-CISS is a MSc in septic shock, and CIRCA 19 was an MSc in COVID-19. And I'm also the founder and director of 2 consulting companies. The first one is the weCANtrial, which is a partner of the weCANtranslate network, and we focus primarily on biologics. And we've just most recently founded a Border Bio, which is an mRNA consultancy. This is coming. We've got our first clients right now, but kind of leveraging some of the experience that we gained by looking at some of the due diligence package and some of the data rooms of some of those vaccines that came. We ended up learning a lot. And so we're just kind of leveraging all that information and bringing a new type of consultancy specifically for mRNA vaccines in the next coming months. I have an honors and I focus predominantly on physiology and on genetics. And I also did a post-grad in clinical trials management as well. And I've got my CCRP from CIRCA. Next slide, please. So this is kind of my typical career timeline. I did go to the University of Western Ontario and I did my undergrad there, and I did a 2-year post-grad, finishing in 2006. Into the 2006, my first year of that program, that position was actually a co-op, so an internship. And I worked as a clinical coordinator over at the University Hospital in kidney research. So I was the one that was on the ground. I was doing all the recruiting and the screening and coordinating all the visits. From there on 2010, I moved to Ottawa. And from 2010 to 2016, I worked with the Omni Research Group over at the OHRI. At that point, I had become a trial manager and I had leveraged all of the lessons learned as a coordinator. And my job predominantly there was to facilitate a phase 3 folic acid clinical trial in preeclamptic women. It was the largest trial in obstetrical history, and what started off as supposed to only be a Canadian-led trial ended up running across 6 different countries, and we had 90 different sites, and we had 2,600 patients enrolled. And that was a CIHR funded, and it was done on time and on budget. And from there on in, I was seconded in 2016 to become a program manager again at the OHRI. And this time I had moved on from the very large phase 3s to what I thought would have been a much easier phase 1. Turns out it was much more difficult, because at this point is when we really started translating all of the bedside research, all the benchtop research to the bedside. So I'm currently in this position right now. I've built a team around me. I think some of them are on the call today as well, which has allowed me to step a little bit away from this and step into my other roles. Yes, so, and that's what I want to talk about today, is focus on that one role. I am also an associate director in industry at Northern Therapeutics. This is more on the clinical development, so really defending the product, and a heavier focus on being commercial ready, which is something that we don't get to see much on the academic side. So that's kind of why I transitioned on that side, just to give me a broader lens to see what we can do at the onset to be able to mitigate some of the challenges we see when we actually bring a product from clinic to commercial. And then in 2021, this is where I started with some of the consultancy, and I've been fortunate enough now to be building 2 different types of streamlines, mRNA and biologics. Next slide, please. So as I said earlier, what I want to focus today is really the research program manager role, which is overseeing the UC-CISS as well as the CIRCA 19 trials. Typical background, either master's or 5 years of experience. So you can most certainly come in here with a BSc, but you're going to commensurate it with the amount of experience that you have. Potential salary range, very similar to what Allison just presented. Again, heavily focused on the academic. You're looking anywhere between 75 to 120. As soon as you move over to industry, this will for sure be increased. And what I do in a sentence, I mitigate risk related to clinical entry, but not only clinical entry, but also staying in clinic, because I know whether it's an IND hold or a Health Canada imposed hold, those are all opportunity costs as well, which delay entry. So the last thing you want to do is impose a hold, because what you want to do as well is you also want to protect the assets and all the investments you have done until that time. So what I try and do the best as I can is, if I see that there are big mountains in the foreground, I will try to flatten them so that the team behind me can continue to run. Key skills, I think, that are useful for this type of position. I think attention to detail. You're dealing with so many people and there's so many moving parts as well, that the organization related to what it is that you're doing becomes paramount to the success at the end of the road. Communication, these are multidisciplinary teams, especially when you're translating from bench to bedside. You're talking with your preclinical team, you're talking with the regulator, you're talking with your GMP manufacturing facilities. You've got multiple vendors on the clinical side. So you've got your labs, and you've also got, in many cases, maybe some CROs. Networking, I've built my career on networking. So I started slow, and I always looked at where I wanted to be and then just kind of ingrained myself in those networks. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that I've become successful today is my ability to do that and to learn and work alongside a lot of them. It's a great opportunity to be involved in collaborations that you wouldn't have normally been exposed to earlier as well. And then project management and time management are 2 other keys, especially time management. If you're working various roles and you have various hats, then just finding the way that best suits you. So whether that's, taking everything and organizing it into one calendar, but time management is a huge key. Other things that I considered early on was bioethics, especially as we move into these emerging technologies. Just because we can do it doesn't mean we should be doing it. And we are, by all sense and purposes, moving to personalized medicine. So that was something that I think on the verge of what it is that we are currently doing in medicine right now and translating all of these technologies to clinic. I think is still a really cool field to be into. And I love research and I love problem solving. So law was another one that I had considered heavily from the onset. Next slide, please. So typical activities. The big thing that I do is develop and implement regulatory strategy and project lifestyle. I want to make sure that we're going to keep on timeline and we're going to be able to execute the plans that we had set forward to do, whether that's to our investors or our funders. Develop and maintain clinical documents, so anything required to conduct your trial. I manage teams and we to prepare for the clinical study initiation as well as the execution. And then we monitor and we report on our progress. So you can't manage what you don't measure. So these are a useful tool to be able to identify any challenges and mitigate any of the risks that might be coming. And then communication. So again, I mentioned it earlier, multidisciplinary teams, and you want to make sure that you're resolving issues prior to them becoming bigger fires. And then last but not least, we want to ensure that the trials we are conducting are being done safely and in accordance with the proper regulations. Next slide, please. So why my role is important, it's clinical entry of emerging technologies. As I've said earlier, even on the industry side, I work with sepsis. Sepsis is near and dear to my heart. Despite decades of research, the mainstay treatment is still to this day fluid resuscitation. And so we are trying to bring other options to these poor patients, because it's not only just surviving sepsis, but it's also surviving well. And we're hoping that some of these MSCs can help tamper some of the downstream effects of sepsis. So that's why it's important to me. I enjoy my role because I love to problem solve and I love to meet new people. Challenges, there's so many challenges when you get into biologics, simply because you don't control the timeline. You can try and mitigate it, you can try and risk it, you can follow it, and you can put your goes and no goes, but there's always going to be there will always be timelines that you must defend. So for instance, even during COVID, we had a shortage of plastics, so that allowed that incurred in some of the manufacturing delays. Recruitment challenges, we were trying to recruit during COVID in our non-COVID related research, and because the ICUs were so busy, that obviously resolved in some delays. And then future career trajectories. I mean, there's leadership and executive roles that you can do. You can always go into industry, consultancy, and obviously regulatory. If you wanted to sit at the Health Canada table, is always an option as well. Next slide, please. So what I wanted to leave you guys a little bit today as well is some career planning advice. So this is a quote that I really love, and I think I've been successful, namely and largely because I have had the opportunity to stand on the shoulder of giants. So I've never been involved in a team where they shadowed what it is I was doing. They've always elevated me and kind of put me in the spotlight. And truthfully, those were the people that I was looking to work with. So I set myself up with some high-performing teams and some high-performing leaders that were known to be able to do that. I sought them. And I always took the opportunity as well for continued education. You meet new people. And again, another networking opportunity, being organized, being a leader, and teamwork, learning from, people at all levels, whether they're above you, beside you, underneath you. And always take the opportunity and see what it is that you can learn, and then start slow and build from there. I started off as a clinical coordinator, and I am where I am today. And I think one of the reasons that I've been successful in what I do is because I've had a really good foundation as to what is required to make a trial run successfully. It's not as simple as copy and paste. There's a lot of people that think, oh, just because we're doing a trial, we're only doing blood work, it's really easy, but it's not. So I've had the opportunity to be boots on the ground and understand what some of the challenges might be. So to the best of my ability, I try and make those clinical trials run smoothly. And rather than have 20 different outcomes, I try to hone in on just one, just so that we could focus and make it much simpler. Because if it's much simpler, you're going to get a better buy-in from the people who are on the ground. And I'm making sure, and I also make sure that they're heard. And I try and implement a lot of those solutions into some of the protocols that we might build. Next slide, please. Again, so professional progression tips here. Again, I wear multiple hats, and the only reason I'm able to do that is because I've also picked opportunities that kind of streamline. So I have built a set of tools that are easily translatable from one role to the next. And learning in one role makes me better in the other role. So for instance, if I want to be commercial ready, what do I need to do on my academic side to make sure that we don't run into any challenges when we enter our phase 3 trials? The other thing I've always avoided was being pigeonholed into one specific specialty. I've always liked to have that broader look. I think it brings more value to teams. And again, streamlining your efforts. So knowing what your strengths are and managing your weaknesses. One of my biggest weaknesses was delegation, and I have my team that helps me with that. So knowing what those are has also been very useful for my progression. And that's it. And I'm happy to address any questions. And then Sonam as well is able to share my contact information if there's if anybody wants to engage in further discussion.
Great, thank you so much. We are open now for the Q&A portion.